Welcome back to the Gooner Fanzine Arsenal Woman podcast. Please do like and subscribe or follow if you're listening, wherever you're listening or watching. Thank you for being with us. Arsenal returned from the international break with a 4-1 win over Leicester City. Izzy, will start with you. I mean, I had a feeling we were going to have a couple of knocks and illnesses. It turned out to be a few more than I was aware of. What was your reaction when you saw that starting lineup? Because for all the talk about not rotating, suddenly you had to.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the way to do it is to be forced into it and it's worked and they've got a good result, a good performance. So if that doesn't teach Renee Slegers a couple of lessons about the positives of rotating her squad, then I don't know what will. But yeah, I mean interesting. I think it was a lot of people were praising the club's transparency when they put that team sheet out and they added a thread tweet saying, Lotta's ill and still coming back to fitness, Cara's not well, and they were actually explaining where everyone was because otherwise I think people would have been slightly in the dark. But yeah, not quite what was expected, but it was a team that worked, and yeah, the starting 11, everyone did well, and I was pleased to see. Actually, I was pleased to see Beth Mead. Thought she had a great performance. Blackstenius, fantastic. Russo and Blackstenius working together finally, and it really looked like it was clicking. So, I do think it was a positive rotation ahead of this Chelsea game because it just shows who's able to do what in those different positions.
Interesting quote, Daisy, in Renee's presser before the game. Tim Stillman asked her about, if she's had any different thoughts about rotation and squad usage, and she said it's almost the most she's conceded because she's given quite political answers about this. She said there's a couple of things we can do differently about how we value the whole squad. That was interesting to maybe admit perhaps it's not worked in the first block.
Yeah, definitely. We've spoke so much about this first block, and I think the biggest concern that we've spoke about is the fact that you can understand not rotating if you've got what we had last season, where you've got this strong starting 11, it's performing every week, you're excelling against the highest teams that you can play. When you're looking at this, the start of the season we've had, and you're not performing, you're not scoring goals, you're conceding probably first every single game, or you're committing a lot of defensive errors. That's when the lack of rotation really comes into focus, and the problems of not playing the likes of Nice Wong or rotating the back line, or maybe even starting a lot of players in midfield. We wanted to see Cooney Cross for a while, and we finally got that. A shame that she couldn't play that game, of course, because I think that's still the topic of conversation we're going to discuss. But
Mm.
yeah, lots of talking points about rotation. I think the main one, but I think the biggest thing going into the next game after the result we've had is probably, is that rotation just a one-off because of injury, or is it actually a sign of who should be starting? It's always the hardest thing when you play a team that's lower down in the league and then you go on and play sort of a title chasing team, because you want to be able to play the likes of players that have played well, like Blackstenius, like, I thought had a fantastic game, Taylor Hines, and then you pose the question of actually, well, I know you've played well to these players, but now we've got a bigger game at hand, and we maybe want to rely on those people that we've trusted for so long. So we're back to the same dilemma again. So it's kind of annoying that we're playing Chelsea next, because that I think that causes a problem in terms of continuity of the players that we've played and rotated. But it also it gives Renee Segers a lot of questions to answer. Is Blackstenius sort of the answer for Leicester, or is she the answer full stop and playing Russo in the 10? For me, not. I don't think Russo in the 10 against Chelsea would be as effective as those lower level teams. But lots of questions for Renee Slakers again, maybe more positive ones than we've seen her be faced with recently.
Yeah, there's a couple of players on the B team, if you like. When you look at those who maybe haven't been in Renee's first choice, who their stocks have really risen this week. I think one, Taylor Hines, simply how good she was for England on her debut, and I thought she was one of Arsenal's best players against Leicester. I really did. I mean, when they brought her in, we were saying it's another left back. I didn't maybe quite believe the hype about she can cover on the right side, Izzy, but she really can. I thought she did really well, and how well she inverted into midfield as well to open up that space for Beth Mead. I thought Arsenal's right side was stronger than the left actually, and a lot of that was how Hines against a back five as well. They were sort of had those the gaps in behind the wing backs. Leicester were terrible. I have to say at the back. I thought a lot of the time it looked like a back four with just one sort of dragged out position on either flank, and they were just picking them off. But Hines, that relationship with Mead was there, and really good to watch.
Yeah, and I think she must be full of confidence at the moment. She's come off this international break with England where she's finally had a call up back to the England setup. She's gone in, she's been handed a game with by Serena Wiegman and she's done really well. I think people are probably quite surprised with how speedy she is and how much pace she offers. And in that game against Australia with England, she kind of matched up with Ellie Carpenter quite well, was able to recover the ball on a couple of occasions when Ellie Carpenter was in possession. And then that's obviously a matchup that's going to maybe come up with Chelsea this weekend. So I think she's really proved herself. And I think the signing is really paying off a lot more than maybe a lot of people thought they would. I was kind of similar to you, Freddie, thinking, not sure why we're signing this another player in this position, but it works really, really well. And being able to cover on the right. I mean, I'm sure the left is where she feels more at home. And you do need that player to back to be behind Katie McCabe. But the fact that she can go over to the other side, it just shows, that Renée Slegers knew what she was doing when she was bringing Taylor Hines in. I don't know whether it's because she's come through the Arsenal setup and they like to kind of have these slightly versatile defenders. But yeah, Taylor Hines, yeah, she's getting a tick from me for that performance at the weekend. And I hope that they're able to share the game with her and Katie McCabe because I do want to see more of her and you don't want her sitting on the bench.
Mm. I mean, Blackstenius should have scored within about 15 seconds, shouldn't she, Daisy? I mean, it was Leicester never really got to grips with Arsenal, and I said it when we analysed the Benfica game, going a little bit more direct, bypassing the midfield at times, getting the ball into these more dangerous positions. And I think Rene mentioned this after as well, in terms of just how effectively, when Stina's playing, you have to play to her strengths, and I think this is one of the best examples of that. She took her goals really well, but Arsenal know she's a player who likes to run in behind. Leicester let her run in behind. I mean, that's another issue. But when you play to her strengths, and you wrote in your piece just how many of these players Arsenal played into their strengths as well.
Yeah, I feel like we've been crying out for it, especially when we've seen this Renee Slager's Arsenal like struggling so much recently as teams seem to have Arsenal figured out, and it's almost like she got to sort of plan A that Renee was trying and she was bringing players on, but they were still playing to plan A. And it's like it doesn't matter who you bring on if you're still playing the same system and the same ideas. Teams are going to figure that out, and maybe they'll wear out towards the end. And that was what was leading to, I think, those narrow victories or losses that we were having. It either worked or it didn't, and you'd win 1-0, or you'd maybe lose slightly, or you'd draw a game because you'd be not defending well. And I think that was a huge problem. So I was really excited to see that Rene had sort of tried something different. I was a bit surprised that Leicester hadn't sort of planned for that. Obviously, maybe they were expecting Rene to go with the traditional front three. They were probably expecting Ford, Mead, and Russo to start that game, and see Blackstenius maybe was sort of plan B in their eyes. But still, you know exactly what you're getting from Blackstenius. I don't think that changes very often. Those runs in behind. I think she's done that on about 3 or 4 occasions in that game. Some hit the side netting, some ended up in the back of the net, and it's just for me, it wasn't the best sort of planning from Leicester because I think you know what you were getting. I can maybe excuse sort of the Russo one where she was in the box because I think a lot of the time when Arsenal play Blackstenius, as I mentioned previously, Russo doesn't get in the box as often, and then sort of you're just facing Blackstenius and you know what to expect. When you add Russo in the box, Mariona in the box, Mead I think was really central a lot of the time. That is a problem for defenders because they've got a traditional back four, which is always difficult against Arsenal, especially with their wing backs also joining in the attack and then not covering sort of the central areas in and around the box. Even from set pieces, I think at times they were struggling to clear. So that is a huge problem. But yeah, like I said in my piece, playing to players' strengths, I thought that from sort of last season where we were doing so well at having overlapping fullbacks, we really struggle with that this season. We haven't seen Katie McCabe getting in shooting positions. We haven't seen Fox or Hines involved at all. We haven't even seen Nice playing. So that was a huge problem, and I think we sort of addressed that a little bit as well. And a huge thing we've cried out for is where are those runners in and around the box when Arsenal get the ball forward? Mead had opportunities to shoot, Ford had opportunities to cross, and actually players were getting in and around the box and in those central areas. So lots of things to consider in terms of positives and improvements. And only the few little niggles that I'd maybe say maybe needs to be fixed defensively for Chelsea, but that's probably a result of not having our first choice back line as well.
Yeah, I mean, still Daphne Van Domselaar a
Mm.
little bit nervy with her feet as
Mhm.
well. There was that one pass out from the back that I think pinged off the Leicester forward. I think it was Shannon O'Brien and really could have gone anywhere. So there's still, And the goal that's conceded, I think Noemi Mouchel, I'm surprised she hasn't started more for Leicester. She scored for them, I think, against Everton before the international break. Quite a similar goal where she's just running at defenders, kept running, get into the box and scored. I mean, I know, Kim Little, as we all know, is not a spring chicken. Laia Kadin is starting her first game of the season. A little bit worrying there how easily Arsenal are opened up. But to see Stina Blackstenius and the ball in from Emily Fox as well to set her up. I mean, that must have been quite reassuring because I had Susie texting me going, "Hang on a minute," but that was just. I think that showed how comfortable Arsenal were in the end, Izzy, that final goal because it was really well taken.
Yeah, it was really well taken. And I think that the whole match, they were playing a lot more free-flowing football that we haven't really seen this season. We've seen them kind of passing around the box, and I know that's something that it's differs opponent to opponent, but passing around the box and not really being able to get in there and get the players into the box and get the crosses to those players. And I think in this game it was quite transitional from Arsenal, and these brilliant passing sequences ending up with the ball ending up in the back of the net. So I think it's a real confidence boost for Arsenal to have a game like that where they're able to play like that, and I'm sure it's much more enjoyable, way to be on the pitch because no one surely enjoys just passing around and round the box and not being able to convert their chances and kind of scraping through on a 1-0. This is much more exciting for the fans, for the players, for the staff, I imagine. So yeah, I think it's a really, really good result ahead of the Chelsea game. And I think, yeah, those link ups between Emily Fox and Stina Blackstenius, that's not something that you would maybe predict, because those two players haven't played like a serious amount of minutes together. But the fact that those are happening just shows that I think that maybe the right work is going on the training ground, and perhaps coming off back off this international break. Sometimes you just need to go away, come back, regroup, and start again. And hopefully it's an upwards trajectory from here.
I know we've been anti-Russo in the 10 here, Daisy, but this is the sort of game where actually, when it almost becomes like a 4-4-2 and Russo's essentially a second striker, I think you see, I mean, very funny how it's basically a heavy touch from Blackstenius, just puts it on the plate for her. And, both of them were finishing emphatically, but actually, you could have gone with Pullover in the 10, but I guess when you are playing a Leicester or a team lower down the pyramid, when you know you're gonna pyramid table, I'm in non-league mode from the weekend. But when you know you're going to be creating those chances, I mean, it shows the value of still having Russo on there, I suppose, and it's maybe gonna, as we say, Russo you'd think would start against Chelsea and Blackstenius come off the bench, but this maybe is going to give Sonia Bonpastor a bit more to think about, and Renee as well, of course.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the talking point because I can't remember a piece or a podcast we've had where I've actually, any of us have sat here and said, yeah, Russo and 10 really worked and we're really happy Renee chose that. But this is probably the first time we've actually said that. And I do actually think, as much as I still think it was a fantastic decision and it worked, Pullover probably would have worked as well because we've seen that in previous seasons and we've seen how effective that can be. I think the real strength was the turn. I mean, there was one from Russo which stands out to me. I love watching it in that game where she just gets them right where she wants them. And I think Tim did a tweet a few games back about Russo's hold-up play being being
Mm.
world class, being one of the best in the game because she has a strength and an ability to really, pull players in and build that, make that space elsewhere for other players to move into. I think in the Benfica game she was doing it even if she was a lone striker. And I think Renee had recognised if Russo is going to do this and we are going to play to her strengths, we can't just leave nobody in her position. We need to have somebody else, and we have Blackstenius at our expense to do that. So I'm really glad that she thought that through because watching another game where Russo's dragged out of position and no one's covering that space, I think we saw Mead try and move into it in the Benfica game, but then that left the space out wide. So you've got spaces and gaps everywhere that isn't working. But I really think it worked. And then you add another element by having Blackstenius in there. And Caldente was really, really good in the Leicester game. I actually thought, dropping back, being sort of deeper in the game and actually having an involvement in terms of playing balls in behind, and her recovery was great. So it's actually, again, playing to everyone's strengths when you play to one player's strengths, I think is really interesting. But yeah, for Chelsea game, I think it's a harder one because I don't think you get the same luxury that you get with that Leicester midfield, that you would against sort of the likes of Cuthbert. I've seen Cuthbert a few times in recent Chelsea games just completely take players out, no mercy shown, and it's not going to be the same sort of space and time that you get to turn in that Chelsea midfield with Walsh, Cuthbert, Captain, whoever does play But it's interesting for both managers to think about. And I think we've seen games before. We've gone into big games at the Emirates, especially under Jonas, where we thought this is definitely going to be a Russo game, and all of a sudden she's on the bench. So lots of questions, and I'm interested to see if Renee sort of goes for a different tactic and sort of tries to catch Sonia out in that sense.
Yeah, I do think off the ball you need a tighter midfield against Chelsea,
Mm.
and I almost think Russo, like if there was a massive midfield injury crisis, I do think she could do a job in there for the reasons you've really well outlined, Daisy. But I don't think you'd want to give her that much off the ball work against Chelsea, and we always talk about how physical Chelsea are and how maybe that's something Arsenal struggle with. So, whether Cooney Cross is available, whether a Palova plays, or if it is just, reverting back to what we're used to. Sylvan asked Renee a good question. She didn't give much away, but pointed out that Chelsea have been playing the back three, the back five this season. Of course, Izzy Leicester did. That makes it good preparation, doesn't it? I know Chelsea can easily switch to a four. I think they have done a couple of times. They might have done it in Europe, but again, that it would have helped actually when you're looking at the game before and what they can implement. But is it a case of just Russo leading the line and Stina, coming off the bench? I don't know. These are the hard decisions this week.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's whether you got to see who else is fit and on that bench because you still maybe need that impact coming off the bench. And I don't know whether if you haven't got an Olivia Smith sitting on the bench or or already on the pitch, then I don't know whether you want to keep Stina back to go on and then make a difference as a kind of super sub, as we've seen her do so many times, especially against big opponents. She seems to be able to come up in these big moments and score these goals. So I don't know whether you hold her back and you let Russo try and do the job and try and get it done, and then hopefully don't need to rely on Stina, or whether you put them on together because it seems to be a relationship that's working and that we've seen work against Leicester. And then the systems are kind of similar with Leicester and Chelsea. Obviously, it's you're looking at a completely different caliber of opponent, but it worked, and I just don't know whether Chelsea are going to leave that much room behind for Stina to run into. That's where she does her best work in that transitional football where she can be on the end of those passing sequences. And I just don't think Chelsea or opponents like that really allow you to play in that way. And Arsenal may have to just be more patient around the box and kind of take their chances when they come.
Um, Interesting when you reflect on the two games last season. I mean, the Arsenal Chelsea game, of course, was Jonas's last at home. The away game, that penalty decision, the Kim Little foul, obviously all the Katie McCabe shenanigans that followed. I mean, the two teams weren't miles apart in either, but it never really felt like Arsenal were gonna win either game. Daisy, how do you reflect on the matchups last season and sort of how that could progress? Where are Arsenal at in terms of, do they have the mental ability to go on and beat Chelsea?
Yeah, this is a huge question, and I find it so difficult to answer because we've only had one game to go off after the break. Like I did say in my piece, and I emphasized it so much, the mindset that Arsenal go into this game will make or break. I even thought that last season. I thought going into that game at the Emirates, we're not in a good place, and that as much as you want to prepare tactically, prepare your system, prepare your players, if you're not in the right headspace, you're not going to win those big games. And I'm not going to mention sort of the sock gate that we had previously where we went to Chelsea and we never win the mindset because I knew as soon as that happened we were never going to win. Doesn't matter how prepared you are because you just can't concentrate, you make more mistakes, you don't cover the space in the same way that you would, and if you leave spaces open for Chelsea, they will exploit. I thought that's exactly what happened at the Emirates last season. I mean, Baltimore 5 foot sort of at the back post, that was just terrible. And the Ramirez scrappy goal that was scored, I just didn't feel we were ever gonna, no matter how good we were on the attack, gonna cover for the defensive mistakes that we made. Go into the other one, I really thought we had a chance. I did. I was stood in Stamford Bridge. It was a storm. It was a crazy day. I was more angry because I thought after the game we could have had that, and I did genuinely believe anyone could have had that game, and it maybe should have been our chance to take it sort of by the scruff of the neck and win. And it was gutting that it came down to a decision like that that cost us the game. But now I'm like, we played one game, it's against Leicester. It's so hard to base a case study off one game. How we perform by week, you don't know. You go into Benfica away, you travel all that way, you don't know if you're going to see the Arsenal you saw in the final or the Arsenal you saw against Villa at the Emirates. It's really difficult, and I kind of wish we could have sort of one or two more games after Leicester to kind of see if this is a pattern or maybe just a one-off. But I really think if you go in with the mindset that you can win this and it could be a turning point and you could build off the momentum that you've seen at Leicester, you can beat Chelsea. And I don't think Chelsea this season are unbeatable. They've got impact players, of course they have. I remember last season we were bringing on players we thought this is not going to impact the game, and Chelsea were bringing on Wright and Ramirez, and we were like, oh, this is just it's just written that way. But this season, I don't think it's like that at all. I think if Arsenal can actually play, a good system, if they can be switched on defensively, if they can react to Chelsea, Chelsea are not going to know what's hit them, and if we can really sort of catch them out early, we might be able to actually play them at their own game and sort of get ahead quicker. But there's loads of talking points around this game. But I do think with the right mindset and building off the momentum of Leicester, we have a really good chance. And Chelsea, I watched them against London City, and I thought if London City had taken their chances, they would be sort of have had a better chance of getting a point or even sort of winning that game. But I do worry that Arsenal will have the mindset of, oh, we could have taken our chances, but we didn't, and we've come through that so many times. So I really hope we don't kind of repeat that pattern against Chelsea.
Yeah, is there a worry, Izzy, that Chelsea have been so good at sort of getting the job done that either they could just get the job done and win 1-0 or something, or suddenly things click, and they really get going and really play their football, and then obviously that pushes them on this season. I mean, it's funny because Arsenal's last wins over Chelsea, the League Cup final, that 4-1 a couple of seasons ago, which was incredible game, and then the other League Cup final before that. So, they can pull off these surprises, Arsenal, because both of those League Cup finals, I mean, the most recent one, that was just after Sopgate as well, or quite recent. So, is this a bit of, maybe you're talking about the Champions League final, maybe you're talking about the Conti Cup finals, you're talking about the 4-1 win over Chelsea in terms of motivating the players. How do you go about, revving them up for this?
I mean, I think you've kind of touched on it there with the finals. Arsenal has performed well against Chelsea in two of those recent Conti Cup finals, and then against Barcelona in the Champions League final. So clearly that says something about how much the mentality impacts the team, and they're able to go into these big high stakes kind of finals of knockout competitions and then perform their best football there. But week in, week out in the league is not quite the same mentality, and we don't see that from them. So it's whether Renée Slegers is able to kind of do maybe a bit of a Mikel Arteta scenario with some weird tactics where she kind of pretends this is a cup final, or just any way that that's going to work to get Arsenal over the line in this game. I mean, either way, I don't want to see a 1-0 result. Okay, maybe if Arsenal win, I'll see a 1-0 result, but it's so boring. This contest between these two teams has been decided by quite fine margins in most of their recent meetings. So I'd like to see a more exciting game, more end to end, more competitive, and just Arsenal being able to relax into the match and able to perform the way they want to. Just bring it to Chelsea. You're at home, you're at the Emirates, surrounded by a pretty much. I mean, I'm sure we'll find out later in the week, but I'm hoping it's going to be sold out or very nearly sold out, full of Arsenal fans. Make it into that fortress that it has been in the last few seasons, and just try and intimidate Chelsea and take it to them from the first whistle. Because if you let Chelsea get control and take their chances early in the game, you're kind of already saying, "Oh, do you know what? We'll just try and stop you, but off you go. You're the champions for a reason." I hope Daphne Van Domslaar's feeling confident and she's looking a bit less shaky, because you're up against Hannah Hampton, who's had a difficult couple of weeks. I'm sure we don't need to go into that, but like, she's going to be wanting to prove everyone wrong as well. So it's going to be a really interesting game, and I'm looking forward to it. But Arsenal really need to come out firing.
Yeah, if Hannah Hampton is player of the match, then we've all got Mary Earps to blame. Is that what you're basically saying?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, Mary. Not
Chelsea
sorry,
five
Mary.
points
Sorry.
ahead. We will. I was really trying to think, can we worm Mary Earps and Hannah Hampton into this podcast? Because
I've
it's
done
what
it.
everyone wants to talk about, and we probably can't. I'd love to, and I'm sure we will in the Tollington on Saturday because it's on everyone's lips. But look, Chelsea 5 points in front. Daisy, I've got to ask you, if Chelsea win this, is that it for the league title?
Yeah.
And bearing that in mind, if Arsenal end up holding on for a draw, is that enough, or do Arsenal simply have to win?
it's not enough mainly because of the contenders around Chelsea as well. It's we're not just looking at Chelsea. I mean, if we were, maybe we'd be sort of laughing in a way because look at Man City, Man United. I think Man City have gone, I don't want to say this confidently, but 9 games or a significant number of games unbeaten. Man United are building momentum. Ch 8 points is crazy. I really thought about it in terms of how many games it actually is and how many, teams Chelsea have left to play. Even
Mm.
if the other teams were to beat Chelsea, it doesn't help Arsenal at all because they then still be behind those teams. 8 points is crazy, and I just can't believe this has happened. How are we were so confident going into this season, and now I'm looking at it like there's no way it can be 8 games on Saturday, and it's hard to find some sort of optimistic way to do this podcast next week if we are 8 points behind Chelsea. But a draw's not enough, it's a win or nothing, and there's no downplaying that at all. Like that's what it has to be. How we do that, I think there's a lot of people who are really pessimistic about it, saying there's no way we can. But from what I've seen from Chelsea, I'd probably rather play. This is where I'm going to eat my words, but I'd rather play them than maybe looking at the other teams who are really sort of scoring a lot of goals. Man United, look, we played them, we drew. Maybe we could have won that game, but they're really building up a lot of goal scorers, a lot of success in attack, and maybe you can catch Chelsea out. And as much as I love Hannah Hampton, and I'm not going to say I'm picking a side in this whole debate, but if it could go the other way, and maybe a little bit of knocked confidence, or a little bit of shakiness, could Arsenal capitalise on that? Even not even just Hannah looking at in front of that line, other players in that Chelsea defence who might be knocked at times from of confidence. If that's how we win it, then I'm not going to complain because that is pretty much what they did to us last season, and they got 3 points. And at the end of the day, that is what matters. I'd love to see, like Izzy said, I'd love to see a great game, lots of celebrations, a lot of rivalry. But if it means Arsenal win 1-0 and come away with 3 points, and that's what it takes, I'd be much more happy than that than walking away with nothing and basically admitting that there's no point playing the rest of the season.
Crowd will be massive. I've just looked
Mm.
at the Chelsea lineup against London City. The players who didn't come on: Livia Peng, Naomi Girma, Alyssa Thompson, and Katerina Vicario. I mean, the squad depth is still very much the squad depth of champions, isn't it? And I have to say, if there is any player who holds a bit of mental, ability against Arsenal, is he? It's Sam Kerr, and her being back and scoring cannot be a good thing for the Gunners, can it? And I know she's not been playing sort of full 90s as she's still sort of be working back to full fitness, I think. But I mean, if she's up for it, she seems to love a goal against Arsenal.
Oh, she'll be absolutely desperate to score against Arsenal at the Emirates, silence those thousands and thousands of fans. That is exactly the kind of moment that a player like Sam Kerr lives for. She's full of so much attitude, and she really, really loves these huge moments. So, of course, she'll be wanting to come on. I don't think she'll start because I don't think they'd risk her for that whole game against Arsenal. But coming on as an impact sub, that is not someone you want to see. You don't want to see sort of 20 being held up on the subs board and her coming on. She's absolutely terrifying, and yeah, I mean, she's getting back into form after such a long time out. She'll have been desperate for a big game against Arsenal, and here it is at the right time for her. So, that is slightly scary and something that Arsenal will want to look out for. But again, as I said, I don't think she'll start. I think you maybe be looking at Beaver Jones, who's also been had a pretty good season so far, scoring lots of goals and those free kicks as well. So uh, either way, as you said, the squad depth is ridiculous with Chelsea. But I think that Arsenal just need to have a little bit more faith in their squad depth in a lot of the positions. Arsenal have a similar kind of depth to Chelsea, and they're able to do that rotation as well. It's just whether Renée Slegers gets the man management right on the day, and it's quite a lot of pressure for her, I'd say. Because obviously she didn't have this game last year because it was Jonas's last game in charge, and maybe she knew she might be kind of stepping into the role. But this is her first Chelsea at home, I'm pretty sure. So it's a big one for her.
Just finally, Daisy, team news wise, obviously we know about the players who missed it. Who do you really need to see back? Who's top of your list? If you can have one player back from the ones who missed it, I don't really have anything, anything news wise, but I think what Arsenal will be weighing up is if anyone does have a knock, if anyone's doubtful, can we do the Van Domselaar Lyon away, sort of force them through because this is the game. And I know they got Bayern Munich after, and they're probably the Champions League, they'll be wanting to win that as well. But it's all on this game, isn't it? And then maybe you have to risk a couple of players, you go ahead and do it. But who do Arsenal need back the most?
My biggest concern compared to Leicester is probably recovery pace, and I do worry about if we have to. We don't have Wibber Moy nor Katie Reed nor Leah Williamson. I thought Tina played well in general, but recovery pace is a concern with her and Catley at centre back. I of course we said so much Katie Reed against these big teams. Is that a problem? You know how many games ago? But actually, the fact we're crying out now for maybe Katie Reed or someone like that to be back in the side who understands sort of the level of this game, even if it's Wibber Moy or Reed. I think either in that case. Of course, I want to see. You asked me for one, now I'm going into all of them. But of course, Olivia Smith as well. I think that is one that would rile the Emirates up. If someone like that, going up against their record signing of Thompson, I hope she plays because I hope both of them go toe to toe. That would just make the game so much better if we get a goal from Olivia Smith or the likes of someone who maybe will actually bring a bit of rivalry, like Chloe Kelly. I'm sure she's definitely up for scoring in a big game. But I do think when you were talking about that, my first thought was we go into these big games, and a lot of the time, I just don't think there's enough rivalry. I don't think there's enough sort of going toe to toe, like celebrating in the player's face, sort of winding players up and things like that. And I'd love to see more of that in this game. I think that would make it so much more exciting. Remember Caitlin Ford celebrating a tackle in the final of the Champions League like we'd won the game. And I think that obviously it's not that caliber of game, but it's up there. And if we see a bit of that, celebrating sort of defending set pieces or defending or sort of side tackles or big sort of moments, big goals, big celebrations, that kind of makes the game much more exciting. So I'm really keen to see kind of that in the game. But yeah, loads more I could talk about midfield and stuff, but I'm gonna go with that because I think that's what stands out for me.
Yeah, there's some characters out there, and I think there are these experienced Chelsea characters as well. Kerr doesn't mind winding people up. Bright certainly. Cuthbert is the main one.
Yeah.
They're confident, and confident for a reason, and Arsenal need to find some of their confidence, and I'm sure they will. Yeah, big weekend coming up for the men and the women. I mean, it's mad to think that the men are playing second in the league, and that's Sunderland, and then the women are fifth of the league playing top. Well, I don't think we quite expected that come the start of the season, but
I
very
hope
much looking forward to
I
it.
hope Katie McCabe is not watching that and taking that as a sign to go in the same way she did in the last game. I don't want
Yeah.
any red cards, please, because I think
Yeah.
that ruins the game as
Unless it's a
well. But
Chelsea red card, I don't mind.
unless Millie Bright gets sent off or
I
someone
was
like
about to
that,
say
then
Millie Bright sent off.
yeah.
There you go. Off she goes.
Yeah, it's gonna be good fun. And we will have our usual coverage to come. Myself and Leif are both at the press conference on Friday. It's one of those where there's lots to ask about. Probably be the busiest presser of the season, I can imagine as well. We'll have our full Gooner coverage to come, and do keep an eye out on our social media as well for news of something later on in the week. And I'm sure you will, but get to the Emirates nice and early. Do it via Arsenal Tube. That's probably giving away enough clues. And we'll see you on Sunday.